Several of the men threw leaflets into the air. We're told they are human rights activists calling for an end to violence against those who oppose the Cuban government. Anna Quintana is a policy analyst for Latin American and Western Hemisphere at the Heritage Foundation. Anna, do you see Pope Francis playing a role similar to that of John Paul II when he returned to his native Poland in the late 70s? Can Francis get the Cuban people to rise up?
I really hope he can, because his mass yesterday and the mass today was absolutely beautiful. And if you see the amount of people who attended, Cuba is not traditionally, the Cuban people they're not traditionally religious, and I think it's a great thing for him to try to bring them back to Christ, and in doing so, kind of preaching those same human rights values that contradict the Cuban government, right? That contradict the Castro regime.
Well, we all saw the images of Fidel Castro, which puts the rumors that he's not around anymore, to sleep. He was with the Pope, Raul, his brother. Are the Castro brothers using this popular Pope, or is he on to their cunning?
I think I think the Holy Father is intelligent enough, and I think he recognizes that that they are trying to use him in a way, but it appears as though the Cuban government is trying to use him against the American government, right? And kind of saying, I don't know if you noticed Cardinal Ortega saying, thank you for negotiating this U.S.-Cuba détente. Well, my question is, and my question has always been to the Catholic Church on the island, when is that détente going to happen between the Cuban government and the Cuban people, right? So this is kind of a great moment for the Cuban government to kind of use it as leverage against the United States government, but I don't think the Pope's going to let that happen.
And what do you think needs to happen for Cubans to be truly free to practice their faith?
Simply put, the Cuban government needs to go away, right? The Cuban people need to be allowed to elect their own government. They need to elect a government that represents their values, that is going to promote and protect human rights, not a government that has slaughtered thousands of people simply for being Catholics. We remember Reagan's ambassador to the UN Human Rights Commission. He was in prison for over 20 years simply for being a Catholic. At the end of the day, communism is a godless ideology, and with that government system in place, there will never be religious freedom on the island.
We saw communism fall in the Eastern Bloc. I mean, Cuba's a little country. Can't it happen there?
I definitely think it can happen, but definitely not with the policy that the United States is pursuing. Reagan never threw a lifeline, both economically and politically and morally, to these crumbling communist dictatorships, right? He allowed them to crumble. But what our president is doing is essentially throwing them a lifeline, saying, you know what, enough is enough. We're tired of being antagonistic towards you. We're just going to condone your military dictatorship.
A much different approach. Anna Quintana, the Heritage Foundation, thank you.
Thanks for having me.